Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to discuss an imaginary scenario where Star Wars and Godzilla cross over. I think that this would be an interesting crossover because these are two franchises beloved by many. I think it would be so cool to see some sort of a real crossover eventually. As I was preparing for this video, I found that Godzilla, even at his tallest, isn't bigger than a Star Destroyer. For example, Godzilla Earth, the largest Godzilla on record, is 300 meters, whereas the length of an Imperial Star Destroyer is roughly 1600 meters. To remedy this, Godzilla and the other monsters in the story will be much bigger. I think that this would make Godzilla more of a threat in the Star Wars universe, rather than keeping him at say 100 or even 300 meters. Obviously, this story shares no continuity with Star Wars or Godzilla. This is just a fan-made video discussing a cool scenario. My story takes place between episode 3 and 4, where the Empire is rising to power and spreading their influence across the galaxy. Now, let's begin. Darth Vader's fleet comes out of hyperspace and arrives at a mysterious planet surrounded by what looks to be storms. Vader deploys his garrison down to the planet and they begin surveying the area. They come across enormous skeletons, some almost the full length of Star Destroyers. AT-STs march behind the stormtroopers who are baffled by what they are seeing. Eventually, the garrison pinpoints the mysterious signal and move towards its coordinates. After a few hours, the team finally pulls in on an enormous kaiju corpse. The garrison confirms the signal is coming from it. However, it is faint, meaning the beast is borderline dead. Lord Vader approaches the corpse and scans its golden scales, massive 3 heads, 2 attached, 1 brutally severed. He scans the beast's long 2 tails and enormous wings. Most impressive. I'll contact the Emperor at once, Vader says as his shuttle lands. The garrison begins setting up camp around the monster and starts searching for clues about this mysterious beast. A few years go by. Through the use of slave labor, a large sprawling Imperial base along with a few small cities reminiscent of Coruscant have been constructed on the planet's surface. The Imperials also subject the slaves to various experiments, testing, and research to further the Empire's studies. At the base, a top-secret project is underway, and while there have been a few hiccups, the project is ahead of schedule just as Lord Vader requested. During the construction on the planet, many murals were uncovered explaining the history of the planet. They describe how it was once a luscious green planet full of life where giant kaiju roamed freely. One day, however, an extremely powerful space monster, Ghidorah, arrived and wiped out the planet. One kaiju, Godzilla, stood up to the space monster. The two engaged in an epic battle. After their showdown, Godzilla defeated Ghidorah and severed one of its heads. With Godzilla now recovering, the rest of the planet's life died off. Now the only things that remain are giant skeletons and Ghidorah's crippled corpse. Meanwhile, Imperials at the base are testing and researching everything they can find on the planet. They even successfully extracted G-cells from Ghidorah's corpse, which will be used for longer experiments. It's hypothesized by the scientists that the battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah could be why they were able to find G-cells on Ghidorah's body. While these are important endeavors to the Empire, the most important project is the one Lord Vader is currently overseeing. The largest installation of the base gets an alert to get ready for inspection. Vader's shuttle arrives on the planet and an officer arrives to greet him. Vader exits his shuttle and asks the officer if his crew is ready. The officer exclaims his men are more than prepared. Once Vader is inside the base, he and the officer head towards an area that's off-limit to most of the personnel. The door is open and the crew is waiting at attention for Vader. Vader walks over to a window looking out into darkness. The lights turn on and reveal the Ghidorah corpse, now upright and mechanical. Presumed to be dead, the Imperials managed to bring Ghidorah back to life in the form of a cyborg. Constructing an entirely mechanical head as well as a life support system, the beast is now called Mecha Ghidorah. Vader looks at Mecha Ghidorah. Excellent, he says. The officer informs Vader the monster is essentially ready. Vader tells the officer that the Empire wants to continue building on the planet and hopes the officer is right. The crew controls Mecha Ghidorah from the control room, and the monster lights up and roars. With the installation now open, Mecha Ghidorah flies out and begins traveling across the planet. Mecha Ghidorah is sent out into a barren wasteland full of rock and debris that needs to be cleared. Vader turns to the officer. Hopefully this is more effective than the TIE bombing runs. The officer assures Vader the monster will not disappoint. From there, the weapon controls are turned on. Mecha Ghidorah's 3 heads begin shooting beams wildly at the ground as it flies overhead. Satisfied, Vader watches as Mecha Ghidorah clears the way. The Emperor will be most pleased, Vader remarks. Not far off is a large Imperial outpost holding slaves. Vader has Mechaghidorah target it. The officer exclaims that Imperials are there as well, but Vader doesn't care. Mechaghidorah decimates everything in its path. In the midst of destruction, Mechaghidorah gets hit with what appears to be a blue ray of light and goes haywire. Mechaghidorah begins flying back towards the base, firing its gravity beams. Vader commands the crew to stop Mechaghidorah, but they are unsuccessful. Mechaghidorah begins tearing apart the base with its gravity beams. Vader runs over to the controls and breaks the computers with the Force. Mechaghidorah comes to a grinding halt in the middle of the base. A few days go by and diagnostic tests are completed on Mechaghidorah. The Imperials are unable to figure out what the problem is. Vader, disappointed by the findings, kills the officer in rage. He informs the crew they have 24 hours to get Mechaghidorah ready to be retested. The crew anxiously tries to work on the cyborg, hoping it will be fixed in time. While working on Mechaghidorah, a report about unusual seismic activity plays in the background. Out of nowhere, a large explosion goes off in one of the surrounding cities. The blast is felt by the crew working on Mechaghidorah. Even more explosions go off and sirens begin to blare. A loud roar is heard in the distance. TIE fighters swing into action to figure out what's going on. Godzilla, awoken from Mechaghidorah's gravity beam test, is now decimating one of the surrounding cities as he advances towards the Imperial base. Godzilla destroys the oncoming Imperial assault and gets closer to the base. Godzilla roars again as he tramples stormtroopers and destroys heavy turbo laser batteries. Godzilla smashes AT-STs and AT-ATs on his destructive path towards the center of the base. Mechaghidorah awakens on its own due to Godzilla's constant roars. He flies out of its holding area, crumbling it and killing the entire crew. Vader watches from a distance. Mechaghidorah begins roaring and firing its gravity beams, ripping apart the base. Godzilla comes head-to-head with Mechaghidorah. The two stare at each other and then charge. Godzilla knocks Mechaghidorah down to the ground, but Godzilla gets blasted with Mechaghidorah's gravity beams. The Imperials begin evacuating the planet and Vader starts heading to his shuttle. Godzilla and Mechaghidorah continue battling each other as they wreck everything in their path, unbothered by Imperial weaponry. The two fire at each other, getting their beams locked. Mechaghidorah overpowers Godzilla and pushes him down. Mechaghidorah flies over Godzilla and begins jumping up and down on him. Vader looks pleased as he watches his creation take on Godzilla. With the situation getting more and more dangerous, Vader decides to leave. Godzilla is finally able to break free using his nuclear pulse and blast Mechaghidorah away. Mechaghidorah crashes backwards into buildings. Vader's shuttle takes off and heads to a nearby Star Destroyer. Vader watches from the destroyer and the two monsters continue battling each other. Godzilla gets the upper hand and spams Mechaghidorah with his atomic breath. Mechaghidorah roars out in pain and fires back with his gravity beams. Mechaghidorah takes off and gets some distance between himself and Godzilla and then flies back towards Godzilla, firing his gravity beams. Godzilla gets pummeled down to the ground and Mechaghidorah comes around for another pass. Eventually, Godzilla fires his atomic breath again and it blasts a hole in one of Mechaghidorah's newly built wings. Mechaghidorah, however, is still able to fly and fight. Godzilla spams Ghidorah with his atomic breath and severs another one of Ghidorah's heads. Mechaghidorah, however, is still able to fight and continues to pummel Godzilla. Godzilla gets close to Mechaghidorah and starts breaking the mechanical head. He hits it over and over and then uses his nuclear pulse to push Ghidorah away and weaken him further. Godzilla fires his breath and the mechanical head falls down. Mechaghidorah falls over in the debris of the base. Godzilla fires his atomic breath a few more times, lighting the body on fire. Before leaving, Vader sends 4 Star Destroyers to kill Godzilla and tells all remaining forces on the planet to target Godzilla. Godzilla destroys the incoming TIE fighters as they pester him with their attacks. Godzilla takes them out with his atomic breath. Godzilla heads back towards his resting place and troops and various walkers follow him. Godzilla uses his atomic breath and wipes them out in a sea of flames. As the Star Destroyers approach Godzilla, TIE squadrons descend on him again. Godzilla engages the Star Destroyers, firing his atomic blast repeatedly, beating down their shields. He gets close enough to one where he destroys it with his bare hands. After a while of fighting with Imperial forces, Godzilla takes out the last Star Destroyers with his atomic breath, setting everything on fire. As the last of the Imperials flee, Godzilla heads back to rest. Impressed by the strength of Godzilla, Vader vows to one day return and destroy him with an even stronger adversary. A few days later, Vader along with a reconnaissance team look through the debris of the base and salvage Mechaghidorah. During their surveys of the wreckage, the team stumbles upon traces of experiments that might have gotten loose during the battle, leaving the possibility open for more kaiju to appear. I hope you guys enjoyed this crossover video. I really had a fun time making it. I definitely think I will make a follow-up video because there's so much more to explore, like how the Imperials were working on projects with G-cells. Perhaps we could see Orga next. Thank you so much for the continued support. I'll see you in the next one, G-fans.